Okay, I inadvertently hit the off button on the previous video, so now I guess I'll have I'm still going to do it with three sections, or three videos, a part 1, part 2, and a part 3. I'm going to finish up this section here, this portion of it. Then I'm going out to the garage and I'm going to show you a little trick that I did for the soldering. But what I was trying to show you before I accidentally shut the camera off was that right on these LED strips, if you're unaware of it, right here where you can see those 4 little dots, that is a place that the LED strip can be cut. You can actually cut right through it. And so I could have, if I only wanted, instead of it being from here all the way to the tip, I could have cut it. I could have cut it right between those 4 little dots. Those 4 little dots right there. I could have cut it right there, and then this light string would have only gone from here to this place right here. So again, it's the LED, the spool of LED that you get is 1 meter, and you can cut it any place. Every 2 inches there's a cut place. Now you'll notice the 4 little dots. That's what you have to solder the wires onto, and you can see here's a couple of solders that I made right here. You also probably cannot see it, but this is the plus. This side of the LED, there's a small plus right there, and on the other side there's a small minus. That's the one thing I did forget to tell you, that when I actually started getting ready to solder all the joints together, I cut all the lengths of LEDs, and I used masking tape, and I masking taped them to the wing in place where I wanted them. And by doing that, when I actually started the soldering process, I would merely take the masking tape off of, say for instance, this one and this one. I would have, actually, let me back up a little bit. I had this entire wing on my workbench. I then, with the wing there, I took the masking tape off of this that was holding this one on and this one, and I put this portion down on my workbench. Then that's where the soldering took place. Once I did that, then I moved on, did the same thing here for the one on the underside, and made this connection right here. Also, as I connected, I actually started on the underneath side here and worked around this way, doing the soldering. And it came around here. And the reason I did that is because this is where the power initially comes in, underneath here. And what I did was, every time I soldered 2 strips of LEDs together, I plugged the battery in and used a couple little wires and stuck the wires to the little dots, and it would light up to test to make sure that the soldering actually went good. The last thing I'm going to tell you before I go out and show you the little soldering technique that I used, once I got everything all soldered together, again, as I got the pieces, as I got this soldered underneath here and here, I taped them back on. I used masking tape and taped them in place again temporarily. And so when I was done had all the connections made, the lights were all on the plane, but merely attached with masking tape. At that point, I went back to the start of it, where the power came in to each joint. I took the masking tape off, and then on the back, on the back of these LEDs, there is a adhesive strip that you just merely peel off, and then the back side of the LEDs have the adhesive on it, and you merely then push it down and press it into place. This, as you can see, it's just on here, and the adhesive is holding it extremely tight. It's a very, very, very good adhesive. So that's that. The lights are again. The power started out from in here between the connection and the ESC, a plus and a minus to each side of the wing through JST connectors, a plus and a minus back here. Went back to ran a plus and a minus off each side. All the connections were made. And actually, what I had 60 spots that I had to solder, wires, attach wires to make the power flow from one set of LEDs to the next set. So I had 60 solders to do, and on this plane there is here's the LED, there's a small one here, about every inch, there's an LED. There's 240 LED lights on this plane. And for there to be only a 25% reduction in the amount of time that the battery charge lasts, I think that's pretty good. One thing I'd want to tell you, when you're initially cutting the pieces of LED and taping your plane, be very careful and make sure that the plus and the minus from this strip, for instance, if the plus is on this side, then be sure that when you temporarily put this on the edge of your plane, make sure that the plus and the plus match up. At one point, I actually had two wires. I'm going to tell you how tough these LEDs are. At one point, I had just two wires coming off of the back at this point at the top of the fuselage, and I didn't realize it. Didn't have these two wings on it, but I had the fuselage on my workbench, and all of a sudden, this string of lights right here absolutely started smoking, getting dim, and I thought, my gosh, what has happened? And I immediately reached over and unplugged the battery. The thing cooled down, and as I was looking around, I had the plane turned upside down and back over. I saw the two wires, and the ends were melted on those two bare wires. So that's one thing you want to be careful of when you have a wire stick to a plus and a minus and it's bare. Make sure they stay separated, especially when you got the battery connected. But the reason I told you this was to once I got the wires separated and there was no dead short, I plugged the battery back in, and these lights came on with no trouble whatsoever, just as bright as they were. So you can hook up a plus to a minus. It's not going to work, but you're not going to hurt anything. That's the great thing about these LEDs. And I had 3 or 4 mistakes through the process, and thank God I didn't burn anything up, nor did I ruin any of the LEDs. Okay, that's that, and now we're going to go out. I'm going out to the garage, and I'm going to show you how I actually did the process of soldering and the technique that I put together. What I did was, I've got this set up here so I can just show you. I've got 2 wires that I'm not going to actually do the soldering, but I'll show you what I did. I got a red wire and a black wire. Obviously, this is some of the wiring that I used. It was a 20 gauge, and this was some other wire that I used, and it's a 22 gauge. So any type of wire like that works fine. Okay, what I did was, when I was going to make a soldering joint, 2 wires hooking to the LEDs, I would take the strip of LED like I've got it here and tape it down with masking tape. Then the wire that I was going to solder to this particular to the LED, I taped those in place, and then merely taking a small nail and putting it through here, I'm able to raise this portion up so there's a little pressure, just a light touch between these 2 wires and the place where it's going to be soldered on. Now underneath here are the 2 little places. This is where a cut was made, right here, and the 2 little dots, that's what you solder into. As you can see, when I press down on this, you can see that the wires move a little bit, so I know that there's a little pressure up against those. So that's what I did. I first started trying to, I had the LED string laid down, had 2 wires laying on it, and then I would put pressure. I actually took and would put pressure with the soldering iron, trying to hold it down and heat it at the same time. And I quickly found out that that just was not going to work. The solder joint, immediately when I picked it up and pulled on the wire, it came loose. So that's when I developed this little technique. And again, what I do is once I've made the soldering on each one of these, then I take the tape off and I pull on the wire, give a gentle pull on it and make sure it's a good solid connection. And then also what I do, once I've got, let me set this up here so I can see it. What I mentioned when we were inside that I would actually test the connection, and I'm going to, even though this isn't soldered together, I'm going to show you what this string would look like. See, I can, and I would test every time I did a soldering, or did a solder. I would do a test like this to make sure that everything was okay, that it was a nice good solder, and that I hadn't screwed up any previous solder by moving wires around. So that's it. I think I've told you about how and where you can cut the LED to get it to the length that you want it. Here you can see, I don't know, I guess you can see